The next intervention that I'd like to talk about is something that has been researched for the last few decades, but has been practiced primarily in the East for thousands of years, and that is mindfulness meditation. The benefits of meditation are immense, and when we talk about meditation, it can be yoga or sitting meditation, just deep breathing, mantra meditation, repeating the same word over and over again. Prayer with focus is a form of meditation, Tai Chi, Qi Gong, and on and on. Basically, there are three components that one can say are common to just about all forms of meditation. The first component is the one-pointedness, focusing on one thing, focusing on the breathing going in and out, focusing on that mantra, on that word, focusing on the posture, on the movement, on the prayer, whatever it is. The second component of most meditative practices is the deep breathing. This is the belly breathing, breathing all the way into our stomach and then slowly breathing out and repeating that over and over again, common to most meditative practices. And finally, the third common component of meditation is that there is no good or bad meditation. Meditation is about giving ourselves the permission to be human. So if I'm focusing on a word and lose my concentration, all I do is gently, calmly bring it back to focus. If I lose my concentration again, I bring it back to focus again. There is no good or bad meditation. There simply is meditation. The permission to be human in practice. Let me share with you some of the fascinating studies done on quote-unquote professional meditators. These are people who have been meditating for decades, have been doing it for hours each day. And what psychologists were interested in was using modern technology, whether it's EEG or fMRI, looking at their brains. So they brought in some of the Dalai Lama's right-hand men and scanned their brains. And what they found was remarkable. So one of the things that they looked at was the left to right prefrontal cortex ratio. What that means is that they were looking at the ratio of activation between this side of the brain, the left side, and the right side of the brain, the front part. People who have more activation on the front side of the left brain tend to be happier. In contrast, people who have more activation on the right side prefrontal cortex compared to the left side tend to be more broody, more depressed. We've known this for many years. We've known this long before there were fMRIs or EEGs. How did we know it? Well, doctors noticed that sometimes when people experienced brain damage, they got a blow to their brain. When the blow was to the left side, very often with other side effects, they also became more depressed. Whereas where people got a blow to the right side, along with other side effects, they very often became more cheerful, happier. Now, I don't recommend that as an intervention. So don't use it at home without a doctor. However, if you happen to walk in the street and fall down, it's always better to fall this way rather than this way. But other than that, don't use it. Now, when we look at the population as a whole, we can create a bell curve. Most people, somewhere in the middle, about equal ratio between left and right prefrontal cortex. The happier people, more activation on the left, less happy people, more activation on the right. When they brought these meditators in and looked at their brain, what they found was that they were quite literally off the chart. Extremely high ratio between left to right prefrontal cortex, suggesting high susceptibility to positive emotion and extreme resilience in the face of painful emotions. They studied some more things. For example, they studied the startle response. The startle response, when there is a loud bang, we flinch. Even marksmen and women in the military who shoot guns every day still flinch slightly, ever so slightly, when the gun goes off. Impossible to suppress it, or so they thought. When they brought in these meditators and they asked them to keep complete calm, complete peace, and then they startled them, it didn't affect them at all. Lama Osser and many other meditators were able to suppress their startle response. First time in recorded history when someone was able to do that. And that says a lot. Here is a quote from Daniel Goleman's wonderful book, Destructive Emotions. Given that the larger someone's startle, the more intensely that person tends to experience upsetting emotions, Osser's performance had tantalizing implications, suggesting a remarkable level of emotional equanimity. Now, some of you may not be sure what the startle response is, so let me demonstrate. Don't worry, I'm not going to startle you, but here are a few clips of the startle response in action. So this is great, this is remarkable results, but how does it help me? How does it help most of us? Are you prepared to go off to the Himalayas and meditate for 30 years? Maybe. Most people are not. Fortunately, we don't have to introduce radical change into our lives in order to benefit from meditation. Some very important work done by people like Herbert Benson and Jon Kabat-Zinn shows the benefits of meditation, of meditating for as little as 15 minutes a day. Let me share with you a study done by Jon Kabat-Zinn and Richie Davidson. So what they did was they brought in a group who was interested in a course on meditation. They randomly divided them into two subgroups. The first group got an 8-week meditation course where they were asked to meditate for 45 minutes a day. The second group, the control group, was waiting for their course, and they compared the two. The first thing that they found was that the group that meditated enjoyed far lower levels of anxiety than the control group. Second, their mood improved significantly. They actually became happier as a result of that 8-week program. So this is great, but they went a step further. They went deeper, and they actually scanned their brains. And what they found was that after 8 weeks, their brains actually changed. Their brains were quite literally transformed. They had higher levels of activation on the left side compared to the right side. This is amazing, especially given the fact that until about 10 years ago, we thought that the brain doesn't change after the age of 3 or so. Now we know that it changes until the day we die. And one of the ways of positively changing our brain is through meditation. Then they injected participants in both groups with cold bacteria. They wanted to see how their immune system would react. And what they found was that those who meditated, their immune system was a lot stronger. So we become more resilient, physically as well as psychologically. We become happier and healthier through meditation. Here is a clip by Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, one of the people most responsible for bringing meditation to our part of the world.
One of the take-home messages of our study is that you do not actually have to be a Buddhist monk and move to the Himalayas in order to benefit from these kinds of very, very powerful meditative practices. That it can be done in the workplace, in a regular life, and that one's brain will actually change in response to it. One's immune system will actually change in response to it.
However, not everyone feels comfortable doing yoga or taking the time to meditate. But here is one thing that I recommend, something that is very, very important, that you all breathe. Don't stop breathing. It's very important. But of course, what I mean is the deep breathing, breathing like a baby does, all the way into our belly, and then exhaling slowly and gently. We don't do that enough in our culture, and we pay a price. What we know is that when we're stressed, when we're anxious, our breathing actually becomes shallower. It stops here. And then when our breathing stops here, we become even more stressed and anxious, making our breathing yet shallower, and so on in a downward spiral, or what psychologists call the fight or flight response, something that we experience so much of the day in our modern 21st century world. Fortunately, though, what psychologists and physiologists have shown is that it's quite simple to reverse the fight or flight response and create instead what Herbert Benson calls the relaxation response. And sometimes it takes as little as 3 deep breaths to reverse the cycle. Because what we also know is that when we're feeling good, our breathing is deeper. And when our breathing is deeper, we feel even better, leading to deeper breathing and on in an upward spiral of well-being. There's a wonderful book out by Thomas Crum called 3 Deep Breaths, where he talks about the importance of introducing the practice of 3 deep breaths throughout the day as a ritual. So the first thing when you wake up in the morning, take those breaths. First thing as you walk into your office and sit down, take 3 deep breaths. Just after coming back from lunch, or just as you're about to enter home in the evening, 3 deep breaths. He recommends that each time we get to a red light, we take 3 deep breaths. Now, I learned how to drive in 2 places, Israel and in Boston. Yep. Now, the Israeli drivers and the Bostonian drivers are not world-renowned for their calm and peacefulness on the road. I'm sad to say, no exception. So each time I used to get to a red light, I used to really get anxious, especially if I just missed the green light. Whereas now, I see it as an opportunity for deep breathing. Imagine if everyone used that as an opportunity for deep breathing. Everyone, especially in Israel and Boston, used it as an opportunity. We'd have better drivers, calmer drivers, less road rage, perhaps. Introducing these 3 deep breaths throughout the day can transform our day, because in many ways these breaths are a form of a mini recovery. In fact, one of the leading mind-body practitioners, doctors, researchers in the area, Dr. Andrew Weil, has this to say about breathing. If I had to limit my advice on healthier living to just 1 tip, it would be simply to learn how to breathe correctly. So breathe. The nice thing about breathing is that you can do it anywhere, anytime, even while you're listening to a lecture. So we talked about the permission to be human. We talked about ways of dealing with stress, and we talked about some mind-body interventions. The last thing that I want to talk about is considered one of the central pillars of positive psychology, and that is